Hello students, in this module I'll be talking about certain advantages and disadvantages of self-pollination or autogamy. So let us see what are some of the advantages of self-pollination. Now look at this flower. Look at all those anthers that are surrounding that stigma. Now you know that if this is a situation, then definitely there's going to be least chances of failure because there are so many anthers around that single stigma. Definitely pollen has to fall from the anther onto the stigma. Is that okay? And then you should also know that in such close proximity, no external agents will be required. So you should say, or you can say that the self-pollination is a sure method, that it has to happen. Is it okay? Then, if you look at this flower, you will also notice that the flower need not be very, very large. This image is very blown up image. It's not a large flower. Is that okay? Then, the flower need not be very attractive. The flower may not have any fragrance, and the flower may also not produce any nectar. So because a particular plant has not got to invest in any one of these, you can say that self-pollination is a very economic method for a particular plant. Is that okay? Moving on. Now let us see some more advantages of self-pollination. Look at this flower again and see that amount of pollen. Do you see? Very little bit of pollen is produced, right? So if the plant is producing very little bit of pollen, you can also say there is no serious wastage of pollen when it comes to self-pollination. Is that okay? And finally, you should also know that you can preserve desired characteristics, yes? And you can maintain and multiply, improve varieties of plants again and again by self-pollination. And finally, you can also maintain pure lines, right, in the progeny. So you can also say that one more advantage of self-pollination would be genetic stability. It can be maintained very well whenever self-pollination is done in plants. Is that okay? Now let us see what could be some of the disadvantages of self-pollination. Can you think of any? Think about it. Self-pollination, which means you are again and again producing the same type of plant. Is that okay? With same characteristics. There is no variety. Yes? So you can say one of the major disadvantage or drawback of self-pollination is there is no chance of forming any improved variety. Is that okay? Which means you can also say that if a plant has any undesirable characteristic, it cannot be eliminated in the offspring. Or if you want to add a desirable character to the offspring, that also cannot be done when self-pollination is involved. Does that make sense? So you cannot remove or you cannot eliminate any undesirable characteristic, nor you can add any desirable characteristic in the offspring. Is that okay? Now look at that pea plant. If I take this pea plant and I constantly keep it self-pollinating again and again and again, with different generation or generation after generation, the plant will get weaker and weaker, and it will also get susceptible to more and more diseases, because as I said, it's the same plant again and again, generation after generation. So you can say the progeny will become weaker and it will become more susceptible to diseases. Is that okay? So self-pollination has got this disadvantage. Let us look at some more disadvantages of self-pollination, right? You must know that if I look at this picture, right? Look at that original pea plant. Look how many seeds are there in the pod. But if you look right behind me, it is one of the reasons why self-pollination is not very much desired, because the number of seeds in a pod or in a fruit definitely gets lesser and lesser if you keep doing self-pollination again and again. Also, the seeds become less and less viable. They won't germinate as well as the initial parents would. Is that okay? So you can say the progeny keeps getting weaker and weaker, right? And also you must know that these seeds now are very less adapted to any climatic variations, which means the moment you change the climatic conditions, the seeds would further fail to germinate and become even less viable. Does that make sense? So one of the major disadvantages of self-pollination is the fact that it is the same plant over and over again, generation after generation. So in the end, there is simply no variety. So there is no variation. There is no variation. There is no evolution. So one of the major disadvantages or drawbacks of self-pollination is it does not favor any variation. It does not favor any evolution. And these are the major disadvantages or drawbacks of self-pollination. Is it okay? So in this module, I've talked about the various advantages and disadvantages of self-pollination. In the next module, I'll be talking about cross-pollination or allogamy. Till then, thank you and take care.